Hey, how you doing? So before I vanish into the abyss again for another 2 months, I got one more video to present to you all before I go. But before I get started, I have a little thing for you to take a look at. Here's a list of all the potentially offensive or triggering or whatever you want to call them topics that will be mentioned mostly in passing and not really focused on, but if anything on here is something that will set you off, that's alright. I'll see you somewhere else, and thanks for checking out the video regardless. Oh, so yeah, if you're curious, sitting behind that box was kinda exhausting on my legs, so we're just gonna go straight college lecture mode on this one. We'll make it work somehow, don't you worry about it. So here's the thing, this topic is gonna be less me giving an objective solution to a problem like my last video, but more just me propping a moral conundrum. Yeah, that's how you use that word. That I feel kinda conflicted on, and I'll give a lot of personal anecdotes throughout this. That's because I've been following this Jonochrome guy for way longer than I could ever have imagined. At least since I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. And that's me highballing it. It could have been as low as 5 years old. But let me back up for a second. Who is this Jonochrome? They sound like an element on the periodic table next to francium. Well, if you're looking for a single person that helped inspire all of this junk, this would be the guy I would say caused most of it. Jonochrome is most well known for developing two types of things. A fan game series called One Night at Flumpty's and a collection of flash games called Riddle School and or Riddle Transfer depending on what year you're talking about. If by any chance you were around the online video game community circa around 2015 or 2016, you might be familiar with this horrifying guy. This was Flumpty's, and this thing took him like 3 weeks to make. Flumpty's was popular enough to garner 2 different sequels, one that came out not that long after the first one, and then one that came out all the way in 2021. Now, in between this and this, there is so much stuff that happened that I want to talk about, but I can't, because if I do, I'm gonna start talking for like 10 minutes, and I don't want to do that. If you want to know more, you can check out this video right here. It does a pretty decent job summarizing everything up. But in between that gap, I somehow wandered my way over to his YouTube page, sort of in I think 2016, 2017, somewhere around that point. It doesn't really matter. What you gotta know though is that what I saw on there blew my mind when I was younger. There were 2 videos in particular that were on there that kind of caught my interest. One that is now, I believe, gone from the internet called Thoughts, and another one that was called Results. To keep things short, both of these videos pretty much pushed me over the line from just being a fan of what the Flumpty's games were to being a fan of the artist Jonochrome as a person. It wasn't just what he ended up creating, it was how he thought, how he articulated himself. There was this one project that he detailed in this one playlist called Comet, and it was pretty much all about just these internal battles he had to face when trying to come up with this game, and how it kind of never ended up really going anywhere until after cycling idea after idea of what this game was supposed to be. And then came more problems with overthinking, comparing yourself to how you were working when you were younger. How the scope of this project is much larger than anything you've ever tackled, but also it seems like much less is getting done than anything else you've done before. I was around 12, 11 years old, give or take. Now, I had tiny creative ambitions. I used to make little comic books when I was younger. As you can probably tell, that hasn't really amounted to much. My drawings was like unfinished wire sculptures, but whatever. Younger me ended up seeing a pathway that he thought he could follow. Every once in a while, I come across a really cool looking piece of artwork or an illustration. And you know, after marveling at it for a good couple minutes, I think about the work that must have gone into it. And I think to myself, you know, I could spend a full year of my life drawing every day, and I still think I can come close to anything that would look this good. Usually that comes from ones featuring the female physique, but who cares? And in some aspects, that's the beauty of artwork. This wouldn't be special if anyone could just go to a piece of paper and twirl their hand around and just produce this without even trying. But the way this relates back to Jonochrome for me is that his YouTube channel serves as almost a small timeline for his artistic progression. I may not be able to draw this, but this is obtainable, and maybe if I draw this, I can get to this at some point, maybe somehow. With how the One Night at Flumpty's games are drawn, they are almost hyper detailed in terms of how shading is done and a bunch of other stuff that I don't really know the terms for. But with the way I saw it, the crudeness of the earlier Riddle School games made me say, maybe if I keep on going with this, maybe if I work from this as a starting point and then work my way up, maybe at some point I can draw something as crazy as this and have it actually work effectively. And one last thing. If you feel comfortable with it, I would really recommend watching the Riddle School for the Riddle Transfer 2 developer commentaries he uploaded to his YouTube channel. It's about an hour and a half altogether and has a really interesting theme about creator torment and fatigue that I think is an absolute work of art. But hey, that might be my 7 years worth of conscious emotional investment talking. What are you doing here? Well, anyways, let's get back to the Swiss cheese, because believe it or not, it's actually pretty important for everything I'm about to talk about. So the reason Flumpty's gained a lot of popularity back in the day is because it was the only real game in the wide game genre at the time that was drawn in 2D, and also didn't look like it was made in MS Paint. That's just the fact of the matter, I'm not trying to be mean. There was actually one other one that was drawn in 2D that was really popular at the time, but I'm not going to talk about it because I'm going to get family-friendly values. How about that? And also, it didn't really attach itself to whatever this stuff was talking about. Sure, a lot of the actual tentacles of the game were the same, but all the characters were, quote-unquote, distinctly original, which kind of made the game have its own flavor compared to everything else. The best thing about it is that there's these little mysteries and twists all throughout it that makes it feel like there's more stuff going on than there actually is.
Also, I'm coming after you. You can figure out the rest. Have fun.
The opening phone call is off in the perfect way. Usually the egg shows up kind of quick after people pull up the camera and see it sitting down here. You have this one room with weird camera static, but then when the night progresses, you see that the camera static actually moves around, and you have this weird lava room that wasn't there before. You have this weird room with a bunch of eyes in a hole, and has this music playing for some weird reason. You got a bathroom camera, which is already weird enough. Just so happens to have a beaver in it, because why not? You read a paper the beaver's reading. Oh look, a man drank lava. That's this guy. And the clown. The clown too is pretty cool, I guess. Yeah, I know I just kind of geeked out there. You gotta bear with me for a little bit longer, but I just gotta convey why people enjoyed this. The second game is even better because this time you got this beast walking around. He's my favorite. This time, a lot of ideas are remixed from what was in the second Five Nights at Freddy's, and some from the first game thrown in as well. Oh yeah, that too. The owl is the greatest failsafe measure ever created. Periodically, you got this owl flying through either of the vents here, and you need to close the proper one before he barrels into your skull, supposedly. The problem is, you have to use the cameras to check and see which vent it's using. You can't use the camera when the lights are off. Having the lights off is what prevents you from being seen by all of these guys. So essentially, this is a 10-minute Catch-22 simulator, so that's pretty fun. And then you got the third game. Oh boy, the third game. This thing is like an A-tier Marvel movie. After the occasional hyper-stressful moments of the second game, the third game is about slowing everything down and making every move feel deliberate. This time you got a temperature meter that will freeze you right in your tracks if you're not keeping track of that with the furnace. There also isn't really any music this time. The second game had this record player that played music all throughout the night. This time you got the nice cold ambience of a room to get used to, so you know. That and your footsteps running across the ground. Underrated soundtrack, I recommend giving it a listen. This is a pretty solid tone, so it works really well and the game flips it on its head and then bashes it in with a hammer. A bit violent, yes, a bit violent. I really can't do this part justice if I narrate it all off. Go just watch the video if you're really interested, since I'm just trying to keep this thing relatively short. Believe me, I'm trying. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the third game. A lot of stuff that made people legitimately interested in Jonochrome because this was the last game in the Flumpty series. And if anything was half as good as what this thing was, then it'll probably be worthwhile to check out for a YouTube video or something like that. So for the first time really, you had people who came in from Flumpty genuinely interested in whatever he was doing next. And he was actually going to get paid for this stuff. Insane series of events that I don't have the time to get into, but just know this was going to probably get released on actual consoles if everything went well. And then the grooming allegations came out, which were allegations for about 2 or 3 hours, and then the response was posted. Alright, so let me tell you the good news first. The good news is that there is no explicit images or anything along that level sent between the two. The bad news, it was 1322. And you know what sucks too? I kinda knew about it. Not the age thing, of course, there's no way I could have known about that. But in the playlist I talked about earlier, there was this other video in there that's now gone called Other Center. There was a passing mention of a girlfriend at the time. And then in this long Q&A video that's also gone, I believe it's an hour and a half long, talked about it too. And I believe there he described it as, quote unquote, the one. So yeah, I was having an absolute fantastic moment of flashback. There was a bunch of weird asterisks and clarifying and apologizing and rewriting of the apology, and a lot of it wasn't as bad as it sounded / original accuser assumed and or lied without consulting the victim. It was complicated, but just know it ended with an archive on the Wayback Machine, Jonochrome presumably going to therapy and cutting the cords on all social media on his way out the door. This was all back in 2021. And he hasn't done anything really of note outside of updating his YouTube About page to indicate he's still alive. If you've ever been invested in any artistic medium, you'll probably be familiar with the phrase, separate the art from the artist. Now, depending on the person you ask, that is either a reasonable stance to take or just a reason to support a bad person. The reason I mention it, not because I have a particular opinion on it, but just because that was the main thing rushing through my brain as this was all happening. Here's the thing, with me at least, I have taken way too much inspiration and techniques from Jonochrome's work for me to kind of easily separate myself from all of this. Inadvertently, when I was younger, I think I placed Jonochrome on a pedestal that I wasn't even aware of until hit the fan. Partly, the reason I used to dabble a lot in semi-surreal content was because of flumpties, whether intentionally or not. Hell, if I really want to get down to the nitty-gritty, I used to refer to myself as Blue Luma for a while, changed it to Blue something, and a big reason why I decided to make that decision was influence from his decision to change his name from John Bro to Jonochrome. That just kind of shows how far down I was in this mess. This is a very apparent case of don't meet your heroes. You don't know what they're like outside of this light computer realm we all like to spend our time in. But where I start to have a bit of a conflict is trying to somewhat justify taking as much inspiration as I did. Of course, separate the art from the artist, but this is the artist right here. This is entirely made by himself mostly. You can't really attribute it to like a producer or director or something like that. This was the guy, he did this, and that's just how it is. Because here's the thing, these things are objectively good. They are well programmed, they're well drawn, they have great ideas. The way it flip-flops from something charming to something legitimately horrifying is perfect. But you just can't justify this stuff, man. The problem is, this thing probably got into my actual subconscious a little bit. This video you're watching right now, you see this? You see the little eyes, you see the long arms? I thought I was doing something kind of unique. Apparently not. I haven't thought about this thing in years. I only came across it because I was looking back on these videos while I was researching for this video. Here's the big punch of the video. I know this is 11 minutes in. Is it more for me to take pride in saying that this guy was one of my main inspirations? I don't know. I've known about him for a while, at least since whenever this YouTube video was uploaded. I can pinpoint exact things where I realized I might have taken inspiration from this, either consciously or not. A good portion of what I find funny is kind of based off what he does. What about some of the things I gathered from this playlist? I'm not sure if I laid everything out of that pathway that I described earlier. I think with how I explained it there, I kinda imply that it was just about the art. It wasn't. It was more about how he structured everything that he did, how he could simultaneously write, do music, do the artwork, program the stuff. Hell, even make a decent enough trailer. That's the reason I think why I was so invested. That's why I bothered to go to his Curious Cat and ask him questions there. That's why I've dug through wiki interviews from Flumpty. Alpha Chef, when that came out, I pointed for that thing. I've even watched a couple of his Let's Plays in full. The thing I'm worried about is that, again, since I use Jonochrome as kind of a foundation for a lot of what I do, that it's going to have an effect of how I do things. And I don't want to be reminded of someone that's like this if people perceive that there's nothing you can gain from this and he's just a pedophile. I don't really know how people perceive him right now. People still like one-eyed flumpties. People still like Real School. If anything, all the negative attention was thrown on the Jonochrome name rather than anything he has made, which is good for me. I could probably just point my finger at one of these things and call it a day. But again, that's kind of duping myself a little bit, because really that's only half the story. I think what I'm probably going to do is acknowledge the influence, acknowledge that I still probably take some influence without me knowing it. Of course, don't endorse all of this shit, but that's just the fact of the matter because I dug a hole so deep for myself. Now, I'm just going to be honest, don't know what I'm going to do if he comes back. I just don't know. For all I know, by the time he comes back, I'm probably going to be gone from this and doing better things than talking about him for like 14 minutes. So for parting words here, keep your owls in check, don't get lost in the sauce, and go watch the new Transformers or something like that. I don't know. Thank you though.